A blade measured 75 digits long. Edge angles verified against the bronze norma, with intolerance on both sides. Carbon temper confirmed by hammering. The inspector's mark stamped into the tang. And then the test. 2 hands on the hilt, tip braced against the stone floor, steady downward pressure. 3 seconds of flex. The blade snapped. My name is Lucius Gratius Pulvillus. I am an agrimenser, a measurer. 11 years inside the fabricae at Carnuntum, and I built my certainty the same way Rome builds its roads. 1 verified number at a time. Every morning, calibration rod to the bronze norma on the wall, stone table level checked, ledger opened. And I am ready. This is what I believed on the 15th day of September in the 9th year of Emperor Claudius. That measurement was protection. That a blade which passed the norma could not fail. That numbers don't lie. The fabricae at Carnuntum is not a beautiful place. Functional, the way a millstone is functional. Designed for one purpose until it cannot imagine another. 3 forge stations run from dawn past the first watch of night. The air tastes of charcoal and hot iron. Quenched barrels along the west wall, filled with Danube water cold enough to shock grain structure into alignment. The sound is a kind of music if you've heard it long enough. Hammer, hammer, scrape, hiss. Hammer, hammer, scrape, hiss.
Nothing the ledger would catch. The bloom ran HIH this week.
The blade that broke was the 43rd Gladius produced by Station 2 that season. I had measured it myself 3 days before. Every number fell inside tolerance. I had signed it through. The Faber who made it was Brennus Vatus, a Norican, 2 generations removed from the tribal metalworkers who smelted ferrum Noricum before Rome arrived to tell them how it was done. He had been at Carnuntum for 9 years. His rejection rate was the lowest in the fabricae. I respected his numbers even when I didn't respect his attitude toward mine. I stood over the 2 pieces of the broken blade for a long time that morning. The break was clean, not a shatter, not a splinter, but a crystalline fracture line exactly 22 digits from the tip. I had seen breaks like this before. They happened when the carbon distribution in the steel went wrong during tempering. Too much heat, too fast to quench, or a flaw in the bloom that the eye couldn't catch. I picked up both pieces. I measured them again. 75 digits combined. Perfect. Still perfect. The blade had not stopped being perfect when it broke. I went to Brennus. I found him at his station, already working the next bloom. A rough rectangular slab of ferrum Noricum ore, glowing a dull yellow-orange in the forge bed. He didn't look up when I came in.
Pulvillus turn. I need that rack certified by end of the week. Legio 14 is waiting on equipment.
He said it before I could.
The measurements were in tolerance. Your process was logged. What went wrong?
High, an imprecise word. I pressed him. High in what property? By what measure? Verified by what instrument? He looked at me then, finally, with the particular expression the Fabri reserved for Agrimensores. Not contempt exactly, but something adjacent to pity. I wrote this down. Color of the quench steam. I did not have a column for this in the ledger. I did not have a unit. I could not calibrate yellow-white against grey. I told him to adjust his process and return to the measurement chamber. My numbers were correct. The blade had failed. 3 days later, I was clearing the discard rack. Blades rejected for deviation, waiting to be recast, when I found the 37th Gladius of that season. I had rejected it myself, 10 days prior, for measuring 74 1/2 digits. Half a digit short. Not egregious, but outside the norma. I picked it up, more from habit than interest, and walked it to the test station. I pressed. The standard flex. 3 seconds, steady force, 45 degrees of arc. The blade held. I pressed harder. It held. I released, and the blade snapped back to straight with a sound like a plucked wire. Perfect spring. Not a whisper of stress fracture. A blade half a digit short of specification had done what the perfectly measured blade could not. I stood in the test room with the 2 pieces of the 43rd in my left hand and the 37th, whole, humming, measuring wrong, in my right. I looked at my ledger. The columns were correct. The numbers were true. And I had no idea what I was looking at. I am not a man who moves quickly toward conclusions. An agrimensor who guesses is a carpenter who measures with a wet rope. The tools look the same, but the building falls. I returned to my ledger and pulled records for the entire season. All delivery logs, shift records, forged temperature estimates. Everything Titus Flavius Apers' records office had, which he gave me with the enthusiasm of a man handing over tax receipts.
Blade flexed significantly under 5 pounds of pressure. Is that all it managed?
Legio 14 will receive certified equipment, Prefectus, certified to a standard we understand.
For 3 days, I mapped every blade against every variable in the logs. What I found, the blades that had passed all tests clustered. The failures and borderline cases also clustered, always in the 2 weeks after each new ore delivery from the Erzberg. Fresh ore, new problems. Stability. Fresh ore again, new problems again. Ore. The variable I hadn't measured. The thing that came into the fabrique before the forge, before the hammer, before my bronze ruler ever saw the finished blade. I had been measuring the output of a process whose input I couldn't read. So I began watching Brenner's work. Not inspecting, watching. Ledger open. He worked the bloom with long, deliberate hammer strokes, reading the color as the metal changed. Not yellow, too hot. Not dull red, too cool. Something between, a shade he had a word for in his own language that the Latin bright cherry didn't capture. Every time he quenched a blade, plunging it straight into the Danube cold water in the barrel, he bent over the steam and breathed in through his nose. A long, slow breath. Then he would nod or not nod. I asked what he was smelling.
That's not an answer a ledger can hold.
I did not know how to respond to this, so I wrote down, quench steam, odor assessment, significance unclear. I had a column for things I didn't yet understand. I used it more than I liked. Octavius Verens was sweeping the floor near Station 2. He had that assignment 3 mornings a week, which I suspected was Brennus's way of keeping him close without making it obvious he was being taught something. Octavius was 22, a Roman by birth, and had come to the fabrique expecting to learn a skill that could be explained. He had been learning Brennus's skill for 4 months and looked increasingly like a man who had agreed to a journey he couldn't describe to his family. I asked him what he'd learned. He held up his hands, both palms slightly calloused at the base of the thumb and index finger, in exactly the place where a hammer grip develops over months. He said he'd learned how to feel when the bloom was ready to fold. Not read, feel. The vibration through the hammer changed. I wrote this down too.
And when it changes, what do you do?
0.3%. You're confident in the quality?
More confident than I have been in 11 years.
I stared at want the fold in a particular direction. I could not make this into a column. I sat with that particular helplessness for the rest of that afternoon. That evening, I carried the 37th blade back to Station 2. The one I had rejected for half a digit. The one that had passed the bend test I never expected it to pass. I set it on the workbench in front of Brennus. I told him what the test had shown. I watched his face.
You know that the blade you made, slightly short of specification, is stronger than the blade I certified to specification.
He said this without apology, without triumph, just fact. The way I would say the distance between two survey points. And I understood, standing in the dim light of the cooling forge station, that Brennus had not been deviating from the standard. He had been correcting for a variable the standard didn't know about. Every time he made a blade that measured fractionally wrong, he had been more right than my ledger. And I had been throwing those blades away. The question I carried home that night was not, how do I fix the norma? That question came later. The question I carried home was simpler and harder. In 11 years of signing blades through, how many had I approved that should have failed? How many had I rejected that should have passed? How many legionaries had been given blades certified to a standard that couldn't see what the Faber already knew? The Norican ore grading records sat in a locked chest in Brennus's quarters. Not hidden, just unasked for. Written partly in Latin, partly in the Norican script that predated Roman presence in the region, and partly in marks I recognized as a color coding scheme for bloom grades. Brennus handed them over without ceremony. My grandfather made these. The Romans didn't know what they were measuring. He tried to explain it. They built the fabricae anyway. 2 nights with those records. Oil lamp burned down twice. What I found? Ferrum Noricum from the Erzberg is not uniform. The eastern face runs high in natural carbon. Darker blooms, harder to work, but capable of a superior edge if treated correctly. The western galleries run lean, easier to forge but needing a different profile and longer hardening to achieve the same strength. Brennus's grandfather had documented this in a grading system, 4 bloom types, each with its own forge protocol, its own blade profile range, its own quench timing. The norma I had enforced for 11 years was calibrated for 1 bloom type. The standard, middle grade. Eastern face ore, run through the standard protocol, produced a blade with too much carbon in the core, brittle under flexion. That was the 43rd. Lean western ore produced blades too soft at the edge, passing the bend test but dulling fast in the field. My norma had never been wrong. It had always been incomplete. Arno, the ore carrier from the Erzberg Pass, had mentioned in the spring that the east face ore ran darker this year. I had been present. I hadn't written it down. No column for it. No idea what it meant. I wrote it down now. Column heading in careful letters. Bloom grade, Erzberg origin, classification. I went to Brennus the next morning before the forge fires were lit. He sat on a stool near Station 2, a bloom in his lap, turning it slowly in the grey early light. Not working it, reading it. I set the ledger and his grandfather's records on the bench beside him.
I want to write down what you smell in the quench steam, what the fire color tells you, the 30 things you know that have no columns yet. No, but enough that the next agrimenser doesn't spend 11 years certifying blades without knowing what he's measuring. And enough that your grandfather's knowledge doesn't disappear when you do.
Brennus turned the bloom over in his hands once more. Then he said, "Show me what you've got in those records, and we'll see what fits in your columns." What followed was 3 weeks of the strangest surveying I had ever done. I was not measuring distances or elevations. I was measuring the gap between two ways of knowing. Brennus demonstrated. I described. We argued about words. He said, "The steel sounds flat when it's ready." I wrote, "Hammer ring quality. Clear ring means ready, flat ring means more heat. No ring means overworked." He said he could smell when a blade had been quenched too fast. I wrote, "Quench steam odor, sharp and sulfurous is too fast. Clean and mineral is correct. Faint and watery is too slow." We built a supplementary norma, not replacing the original, but sitting alongside it. 4 bloom grades, each with its own tolerances, its own acceptable deviation ranges, its own sensory checklist. Octavius, I later discovered, had been keeping his own notebook for 4 months. 17 pages of observations from watching Brennus work. He had noted the quench steam variation 2 months before I did. In the margin he'd written, "Ask Pulvillus if this matters." He hadn't asked. I hadn't looked. The supplementary norma went to Titus Flavius Aper on a Thursday morning. He read it looking for the number at the end. The number, projected rejection rate, 0.3%, against my current rate of 4.1. Most of my rejections had been correct blades from non-standard blooms. 11 years of discarding good swords. Aper approved it the same day. He was interested in output. The supplementary norma gave him better output. He was not curious about the philosophy that produced it.
That one's right.
On the day we certified the first rack under the supplementary norma,
Very good, Brennus.
Brennus came to the measurement chamber. He'd never had reason to be inside before. He stood in the doorway, looked at the bronze norma mounted to the wall, then at the supplementary document fixed beside it in a new bracket I'd had made. He didn't speak about the months of work. He picked up a finished blade, a Western bloom build, correctly profiled, correctly certified, and held it the way a man holds a tool he trusts.
Almost 0 rejects.
He ran his thumb along the flat and listened to the ring.
Excellent, Lucius.
He nodded once.
The expanded norma
Set it
improves
down.
Precision. Another fine batch, Lucius. This one looks good. Eastern, I believe. Let's see how the next fares.
He left. I wrote in the ledger, Blade 41, Season 2, certified. Bloom grade, Western. Quench, correct speed. Hammering, clear. And in the margin, a note I had never written in 11 years. Faber assessment, correct. I think about the 43rd blade often. It passed every test I had built. Every column signed it through. By my system, it was perfect. By the test that mattered, it wasn't. I certified it because I believed measurement was the whole of understanding. That if the number was right, the truth was right. I was wrong. Not because measurement is wrong, because I had measured the wrong things. The norma is only as good as the understanding behind it. A groma lays out a straight line, but it can't tell you if the terrain has shifted since you set your baseline. You have to go back, resurvey. Be willing to find that years of measurements were built on an assumption you never examined. Brennus's grandfather found the true line in Noricum or before Rome arrived. He wrote it down in marks we almost lost. Brennus carried it in his hands for 30 years. The supplementary norma went to Fabricae at Aquileia and Vindobona within the year. Every blade Brennus made before he retired, certified, correct. Not because he changed what he knew, but because there was finally a system that could see it. The numbers don't lie. They never did. But they can only speak the truth about what you've thought to measure. The rest, the color of the steam, the ring of the hammer, the 30 things that live in the Faber's hands. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because it can't fit in a column. It waits for the person willing to build a bigger ledger, and then it speaks.